Hello, hello. This is Aim with Soga Talks. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I know where you know where to follow us. Okay, we're on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on X. We're on major podcasting platforms. So please join us if you are a tech professional, if you're enthusiasts, if you're business leaders, because we all know that business leaders have to be tech savvy nowadays, and that's why we're here with Soga Talks today. I'm very happy because Ben Pring is here with me. Ben, how are you?
I'm great, Irene. How are you?
Absolutely, it's my pleasure because the topic today is so future looking, but at the same time, I wanted to be grounded on today's reality. How is that for a plan?
I try to be in the future, but in the present as well. So
Love
I'll
it,
try and
love it.
help.
So why don't we start, Ben, with what does it mean, for AI in 5 years?
Wow.
Let's start. Yeah, how workplace is going to be completely different from what we are, or maybe not. This stage is yours. Just draw some pictures over here, Ben. Thank
There are
you.
some pictures. Yeah. Well, no, this is an incredible time, isn't it, Irene? And I think anybody who's paying attention and anybody who's sort of following leading edge technology and has done for a while, it's probably has a sense that things have never been this incredible before. I sort of have been an analyst, a technology consultant for more years than I care to remember. I was one of the first people to sort of pick up on cloud computing, software as a service, back in the mid 90s, would you believe? And I started writing about cloud 97, 98, 99. I met this guy writing code in his apartment. I thought he was going to be a big deal. I wrote a note about his company and nobody ever heard of them. Nobody talked about them. It was Mark Benioff. And so I kind of followed this cloud revolution in the last 25 years. And I've seen how that's changed everything. It's changed how businesses organize their technology, how technology is developed, deployed. We're using the cloud now, obviously, on this platform. Everybody's using the cloud. And it's changed everything. But I think the cloud is going to be nothing compared to what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 25 years in changing every aspect of not just business, but life. And 5 years, I think we're going to see, within that 5-year period, we're going to see big businesses deploying AI technologies up and down their stack into every process that they run. We're going to begin to have seen the displacement of human labor with software-based labor, agents, if you want to use that language, which people are now talking about. I think anybody who's looking at that, who imagines that this is not going to be traumatic for society, it's not going to really upend many aspects of society, which, a society is based on employment. People have to make money to, contribute and live within society. Anybody who thinks that's not going to be traumatic, I think, is trying to sell you a bill of goods. I think it's going to be very traumatic. You just have to look at the pace of LLMs and the integration into avatars, digital humans, whatever you want to call them, to imagine that the call center that you're calling in 5 years' time is going to be completely avatar-based, software mediated. You only have to look at the deployment of this technology into high-end intellectual, bourgeois, white-collar, no-collar work, whatever you want, software engineering, to imagine that within 5 years, that's going to have changed very, very significantly. And, there's going to be a lot of good things that come along with that, but there's also going to be a lot of challenges, I think. So, 5 years, what is that, 29, almost 2030. Yeah, I think the shock of this is going to be very, very significant in the next few years. Because we're not just talking about GPT-4 or Gemini latest rev. We're going to have seen lots of different revs of this within 5 years. And I've never seen anything as powerful as this happening as fast as this. And, I've been looking at tech, as I say, for 40 plus years.
Incredible, truly incredible. Speaking of today trends, okay, what are the most promising, you think? All right, because 5 years, it's a very long time in the age of AI. we all understand, right? So
Yeah.
what sounds like most promising in terms of bringing value to companies? Because we know there are lots of disappointments, right, where AI
Mm.
being deployed. So
Yeah.
what's your
Yeah.
view? Mhm.
Well, I think you can go through the sort of important pillars of society, the important pillars of business, if you like, and obviously healthcare is an area, a very dysfunctional area, up and down the whole kind of value chain from science through to deployment that individuals like us experience. So clearly on the science end of medicine, all the work that's being done around protein folding and cancer innovation, diagnostics, etc., drug discovery. That's clearly going to be an area. That's the new frontier breakthrough area. That's why Mr. Hassabis got the Nobel Prize recently. So you've got to imagine that's going to take off. But again, think about that healthcare value chain from science through to delivery, and then all of the business, the commercial elements that go through with that. Think about how dysfunctional billing is. Think about how dysfunctional the operating model for a lot of organizations in healthcare is. Again, this sort of technology, avatars, making use and sense of and meaning out of unstructured data. I mean, there's so many areas where that could have very, very profound impact and improvement. And clearly lots of tech orientated people, including Amazon, have tried to take a run at the healthcare industry, and there's lots of dysfunction. There's lots of funky incentives that keep that dysfunction kind of rolling along. But that is one example of an area which I think is going to be profoundly changed in the next few years. And then so you can go through education, you can go through finance, you can go through software engineering itself. I mean, there's clearly a revolution happening, the early stages of the revolution happening in how code is created, and all the big software engineering firms at the moment are sort of like rabbits in the deer in the headlights as to how they write code, how they manage code, how they test code. Again, I sort of can't help, I suppose, because of my age, always put this into a historical context. And this recent history, if you like, of cloud. And if you roll the tape back, and it's interesting, we're now in 2024, roll the tape back 30 years. I was a kind of junior boy back then in what's now PwC, Coopers and Lybrand, when I was working there. The T-boy, if you like, back in those days. And I remember this senior partner. I was in the IT practice in London, and I remember this senior partner, walking past me in the corridor one day, and he said, remember, this is 1994, if you can remember that far back. And he said to me, Ben, I've heard about this interesting thing in America, in the United States. It's called the information superhighway. Somebody told me about it. Can you go off and find out what that is? And of course, there wasn't an internet then, commercial internet, to research the internet, because he was talking about the internet. That maybe some people don't remember this. The younger folks won't remember this, but the vice president of the time, Al Gore, was credited with discovering or inventing this thing called the information superhighway. He started talking about it using that language. And of course, this is Andreessen and Mosaic. And my point is, between 94, when we began to commercialize the World Wide Web, which commercialized this thing that had been developing in academia and in the industrial military complex, as that became commercialized between 94 and 97, 98, there was this period in which people figured out there was this new technology and they could do something new with it that people hadn't been able to do before. And two companies, I mentioned one of them already, Salesforce, figured out that we could deliver code in a different way, but we could also create code in a different way. It wasn't just about distribution. It was about the production process for creating code. That's the whole SaaS cloud revolution. But a bunch of other companies, including one I worked for a number of years, 10 years, Cognizant, guys in India figured out, well, now this allows us to move work, to do work. We don't have to do it in New York anymore. We can do it in Chennai. And so in that 3 or 4 year period, people figured out that this technology allows us to do something in a different way. And they set up companies, established companies, to do something different. And I think, fast forward now, we're in this moment between, people realizing that ChatGPT is a kind of a game changer. 2 years ago now, isn't that? And people are figuring out, and I think we're still looking for, maybe you've seen them, Irene, maybe people listening in are working in these companies, net new companies, which are going to commercialize in ways that the established incumbents are not going to be able to really, because they don't have the incentive to destroy their own model. People may have seen this company in the last couple of weeks, X11. That might be one of the first examples of a net new company based on this new technology doing things in a different way. So that's the kind of moment, I think. And, within the next 5 years, again, those small startups, VC, these guys have Andreessen Horowitz backed, they're going to start becoming more prominent on the scene. And if you're the buyer, if you're the CIO or the CMO or somebody working in that healthcare organization, now you're going to have a serious alternative to buy from. The incumbent model, and now there's a different model based on this new technology, and we can make a real proper purchasing decision about the trade-offs we want to make between the old model and the new model. And that new model, I think, is just emerging and establishing itself at the moment. It's not mature, it's not ready for prime time in a way, but that's what's coming in the next 5 years.
The game is very much on, Ben. That's what I'm hearing from you. Okay, yeah. Thank you for reminding for internet, about internet revolution, cloud revolution, how many mini revolutions happened between then and now, right? Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Those who are first to the game, those who figure out like the fastest, the smartest, better for customers, right? Those are the winners. And what I see left and right from where I am, of course, AI has so much, to promise. All right. Seem like everyone is thinking, fear of missing out, right? Where I am in this game. And at the same time, you got to be realistic. So in terms of like slowing down and thinking for businesses, what kind of advice is there?
Yeah. No, that's right. I think that's exactly right, Irene. I think everybody has got the memo now. Again, and that process of this kind of nuclear bomb going off and everybody realizing that something really significant is happening. This has happened much quicker than in previous technologies. I think, again, without boring people too much in the history of this, I spent years as a Gartner analyst writing about on-demand computing, application service providers, the cloud, utility computing, before these terms became well understood, before people understood what SaaS was, before cloud became the de facto sort of term that we all locked onto. And in those years, lots of people thought, wow, this is stupid. It sounds crazy. It sounds like, kiddie computing, childish. It's not the way grown-up big businesses do things. So that process probably took 5, 6, 7 years before, even beyond the Salesforce IPO in 2003, which kind of proved that there was money to be made in this model. It still took a lot of people a long time to get this and understand what this transition was going to be. That 10-year process, let's just call it 10 years for ease, if you like, that's happened in, a year. Because I think everybody, when ChatGPT came out, everybody played with it and everybody was blown away. And it was a huge, as Google talked about, a huge code red for everybody to figure out what this is. So between that moment 2 years ago and now, clearly the big consulting companies, Accenture, Cognizant, others, Deloitte, blah, 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 PwC, have been working very hard and making a lot of money, helping their clients figure out, how serious is this? How real it is? Is it ready for prime time? How do we actually do this? And then, equally as important as the technology, trying to think about their sort of business process architecture. Where should we do this? How should we do this? Where should we prioritize? Where should we go first? How do we do a small pilot? How do we then scale that up? How do we do any knowledge transfer? Because our people don't understand this. Again, I think this is a very underreported part of this whole discussion, is that, clearly lots of people have been running at AI, machine intelligence for a long period of time. I wrote a book in 2017 in the wake of the AlphaGo Lee Sodal game of Go. Lots of people sort of picked up on this then. Lots of people, including IBM, spent a lot of money, a lot of time running at this and hadn't cracked it. OpenAI, for all of the ups and downs that they've gone through subsequently and still seem to be going through, those guys, and it's a very small number of people who figured out how to do this. You're talking about maybe a dozen people 2 years ago who really understood how to do this technically. Now, 2 years later, maybe there's 500 people in the world that really know how to do this, plus minus, but not a lot of people know technically how to do this. So again, if you're a Bank of America, if you're JP Morgan, if you're PwC, if you're American Airlines, whatever, you've got to understand how to do this. You may not have to write the core code, but you need to understand how to deploy this into your business process architecture. That knowledge transfer, I think, is probably going to take longer than a lot of people imagine, because that's more difficult. It's like you're training wizards. You're teaching people to be wizards. I don't think that's as easy as some people are imagining. So again, within your 5-year window, that may be a constraining factor on this explosion. But that's the moment we're in, where we've invented this new thing, this magic, this nuclear bomb. Now we've got to deploy that intelligence, that knowledge into people who can then be the conduit to actually deploy this in material ways in business. And I think, again, that is probably realistically going to take longer than some people would argue. I do think 5 years is a realistic period where we're going to see very significant change. But that's the kind of moment we're in, I think, at the moment.
You mentioned a couple of very important points that resonated with me. So innovation is not done in huge labs anymore. Okay, do you agree? Don't you agree? Because again, we're seeing these new platforms popping up, and it's really like dozen, if not less people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means like everyone equal, right? As long as you have some computer and some computing power at your fingertips, right? And you have something to offer to this world, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think this is, again, one of the interesting second order effects of what's going on is, and again, all of these technologies being cumulative, the AI and everything building on cloud and distribution and ubiquity of computing. Elon Musk said this recently. I saw him being interviewed, made me laugh. He was being asked, what's the value of university nowadays? What's the value of an Ivy League education? And is it worth spending $80,000 a year to go to Harvard or whatever? And he said, and I agree with him, is that you can basically learn everything now online. I mean, there's obviously a lot from this very small high priesthood of people that crack the technical code. Now a lot of that is seeping out, and there's quite a lot of literature and video-based training courses online. So you can basically learn any of this online now. You don't have to go to Harvard. The reason to go to Harvard is the network, the prestige. The reason to go to university is to learn how to be a young adult on your own, away from your parents, and that's very valuable. I don't think we throw that baby out with the bathwater, but the point is that anybody can learn and become very, very deeply embedded in this technology in a way that's never been the case. Somebody in Africa, somebody in India, somebody in, wherever, very remote places can figure this out. And clearly that is going to happen and is beginning to happen. And you see this in things like Perplexity and some of the other, technologies that are bubbling through. They're coming from people who haven't been through traditional routes, traditional kind of ladders of education and employment. And so that's got to be very, very interesting. The next open AI, the next big thing, the next big breakthrough technology is probably going to come from left field, from something that we don't really understand. Of course, issues around distribution, around branding, around access to market, they all continue to be very important, and VC networks and the usual channels to market that the big players, the incumbents, control, continue to be very important. But I do think, to your point, it's going to be very interesting to see this democratized in a way that we haven't been able to seen before. And again, who knows where that's going to take us? Within 5 years, within 50 years, it's going to be a very, very different world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just want to make a remark here on education, because it looks like it's on everybody's mind. Okay, it's for yourself, for kids, for grandkids, for future generations. To me, knowing what you need to learn, okay, that's already a step forward. That's why the education system in place to kind of orient and help you to find, hopefully, right, find your way. And then, yes, absolutely, once you figure out, right, this is my place, and hopefully some of the podcasts, okay, help people to do just that. All right.
Well, this is clearly the podcast. It's the podcast election, aren't they calling that, this recent election cycle? And no, I think you're absolutely right. And it's great why you're doing this, Irene, because I think young people, not just young people, but in this context, young people have access to information in a way that they've never had before, outside of the library, outside of the book, outside of their small community that they, physically, geographically are located in. And that's amazing. And I think, again, we haven't begun to see the full impact of that on society. It won't happen in the short term, and it's happening in the short term, but the real long-term implications of this will take decades to roll out. But I'm sure they'll be very interesting and exciting.
Exciting, for sure. Another point you made earlier, all right, while big consultant firms and everyone seem to be right in the race and convincing customers and the world that they are the one who know, okay, at the same time, people you mentioned on the other side, on the receiving side, all the staff, all the professionals, all the way from blue collar to white collar, there is so much resistance out there, okay? Not everyone is ready to be taken to next level, where again, it's still experiments, okay? We cannot say 100%, yes, this AI tool exactly what you need, especially if it's highly sensitive area, especially when it's health and money. And something that you don't want to put to high risk, right? So how about those roles? How they changing, and what is the most potential for people, in which roles actually it will be less disruptive in a good way?
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. That those forces of resistance, if you like, are very real. And again, there's a sort of grand hypocrisy in that, bourgeois, white collar people, lawyers, doctors, were all, mainly quite comfortable with the idea 50 years ago of automating blue collar work away, because it didn't really impact them particularly. Although, of course, you might argue socio-politically that, current sort of political cycle in many parts of the world is a direct consequence of that automation of blue collar work 50 years ago. So now the technology develops and increases, and now it's beginning to wash up on the shore of white collar work, bourgeois work. And so now the doctors and the lawyers are saying, oh, we can't automate away our work. So there's a hypocrisy within that. And clearly things like the American Medical Association, the British Medical Association, these sort of professional groups in a way are just fancy unions. they control accreditation to control supply and demand really within their industry. And so, yes, there are going to be huge forces of resistance as this impacts on a lawyer's ability to bill hours or a doctor's ability. I think ultimately that battle is going to play out again over the next 5 years, 10 years longer, and ultimately is going to be won by the side of technology and the side within those incumbent established industries that align themselves with the technology rather than try to be ultimately just forces of resistance. Because I think, again, without sounding grandiose or pretentious, technology is really just a manifest destiny. And if it gets blocked in one area, typically what happens is it will find another way to get around that blockage. And I think this is an area where all of these big structural industries, legal industry, the healthcare industry, the consulting industry, ultimately will change, and the companies within those industries that do best are going to be the companies that realize this sense of manifest destiny and look to adapt quickly rather than look just to be forces of resistance. Again, within the industry, I'm very familiar, the consulting technology services industry. A lot of people sort of resent Accenture because they're number one and they've always been number one, or they've been number one for 30 years. But I think it's incredible their ability to leverage disruptive technology, absorb it, build it into their model. They did this with the cloud. They did this with labor arbitrage, Indian-based outsourcing, and they seem to be doing this again with this technology in a way that other competitors haven't done. And I think that's a tremendous example of an incumbent leveraging the technology for advantage rather than disadvantage. And I think other professional service firms, legal firms, et cetera, would do well to take heed of that. I do think that I wrote a piece a little while ago called "The Knowledge" about the London taxi industry. If people have been in a London black cab, the drivers do this long process. This is a few years ago, before smartphones and GPS showed up. They did this thing called "The Knowledge," where it took them 3 years of driving around the streets on a little moped to learn all the streets. And to be able to drive you anywhere within this huge city. That was called "The Knowledge." And of course, now the knowledge is just, as I say, GPS map on your phone. It's Uber, and I think that sort of period in the last 10, 15 years, as that industry, this knowledge-based industry, has been disrupted because the number of people doing the knowledge has shrunk, enormously, and now London is full of people driving for Uber, through their phone, and so that change and that disruption of the knowledge, I think you can directly apply that as a metaphor to all sorts of other knowledge-based industries. And again, for people who know that story of how the London taxi industry changed in the last 10 years, the same is true to a degree in New York and other big Western cities. They know that there have been tremendous struggles and challenges within that transition, unions, the local mayor, all this sort of stuff. So all of that turbulence and all the ups and downs of that, again, you apply this in the future, but the net, the bottom line, the manifest destiny is the Uber one, because you can't beat the tech ultimately. And if you think you can, you're sort of you're fooling yourself. And again, I think this is why this phrase that people are becoming familiar with, and seems to be more and more people leveraging this notion, is that your job isn't going to be taken by AI. It's going to be taken by somebody using AI. I think that's a nice way of kind of summarizing that dynamic and that manifest destiny.
To address some insecurities, okay, because like it or not, people don't like to accept it that they worry about this, right? But every conversation goes into, oh, we're all gonna be replaced. No, we're not. No, we're not. And lots of conversation I'm hearing or leading, actually, it's about automation and creativity, AI and creativity, okay? But I would like your opinion, Ben, on rather AI and human decision making and human influence in what the world is gonna be. Because right. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, no, that's right. I do think a lot of human work, human jobs, people, again, in the literature talk about the difference between jobs and tasks. And a lot of people like to think, well, jobs aren't going to disappear, but tasks within jobs are going to change. And, there's good sense within that. But I do think a lot of jobs are going to change. And I do think that there's a bad news story within that, a troubling story within that from a socio-political perspective. I mean, think about, I've been trying to, we're not going into the detail of it, apply for insurance recently. And not to be rude or unpleasant or
please be yeah, exactly, we all relate to this kind of experiences. So.
You have, and I think this is a common experience for people in banking, with their bank or with their insurance company or their healthcare company. You're talking to somebody on the help desk, and it's just painful. I mean, it's just, the whole process is painful for you. It's probably painful for that person doing the job. It's not a great job and can't be much fun. So I feel sorry for that person in a way, but it's painful. And you've got to imagine that whole process is going to be rewired with LLMs, with digital avatars pretty darn quickly. The price of that from the business's perspective is going to be, attractive. There's going to be a whole reduction in HR related issues that will be attractive. So those jobs, I think, are going away. And the idea that person in that call center in a low cost part of the world is going to be able to be trained into some other more creative, more fulfilling. I mean, I'm not sure I buy that. I'd like to buy that, but I don't really buy that. I think that person is going to be, given their, pink slip, and they'll have to go and find something else. And I hope they can find something else, because I think that's going to be very difficult for that type of skill set, if you like, or that level of knowledge, education, etc., to find something comparable. I maybe some people find that unpleasant to hear that, but I think that's a simple truth. So that I don't think we should overlook that, because that does have very important socio-political implications that we should be trying to get ahead of as societies. So that's one thought. The second thought is that the notion that we can't create new work and can't create new jobs is clearly ridiculous. Lots of people today work in jobs that didn't exist 20 years ago. If you're doing search engine optimization, that job didn't exist 10 years ago. So we are creating lots of jobs. The structural socio-political question is, can we create enough of these new jobs to backfill the jobs that we automate away? Again, that's debatable. I could argue both sides of that. But yes, of course, we're going to invent whole new jobs, new job categories. And as you say, as you sort of touched on earlier on, Irene, a lot of particularly bourgeois jobs in the next 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, again, I'm being slightly cheeky here, but basically humans are training data for the software. And, that job, that doctor job, probably be very, very different as the software has become more and more powerful through the transfer of knowledge to the software. But to imagine that the human doctor then can't go on and continue to explore and discover and invent new things to do on top of the software, again, I think you have to be an optimistic person, and you have to be put this in the context of the evolution of work in the last 200 years to imagine, of course we're going to do that. And that's the challenge, and the opportunity that we all face to do net new things that we haven't thought of before in net new ways that hopefully reduce the cost, create abundance, if you like, of opportunity by driving price points down, rather than just using the technology in a sort of network effects basis just to suck up all the money and all the opportunity into that high priesthood of people who understand the basic technology. That's again another kind of very real fear that I have. But yeah, I imagine, we're probably in this 5-year window we're talking about, certainly in a 10-year window, certainly in a 20-year window, that more and more young people coming into the workforce will be doing jobs in 10 years' time that, you and I probably can hardly recognize today. And that would be a good thing. I mean, it'll be weird, but it'll be a good thing. My parents never really understood the job I was doing. It was kind of weird to them. I hope the same cycle repeats.
It will. We're not going to fight the future, okay? Because this is a lost battle, all right? So the best we can do is to share what we know. And I'm not worried about younger generations at all. They're born with it, okay?
Yeah.
They don't even have those grievances. They don't even have that knowledge that, previous generation had. And that's a blessing, all right? Ben, time is flying. I enjoyed this conversation immensely. There's so many other things I wanted to ask, just to be, within the time frame we dedicated. Ben, what about a few takeaways?
There's so much, such a big onion, and it's difficult to unpeel it. There's so much to talk about, Irene, and it's good for people like us. Gives us something to talk about. But I'll leave you with two thoughts. One, probably not surprising thought, but just to sort of re-emphasize it. And then perhaps a slightly more surprising thought, or a slightly sort of more contrarian thought. One is, I've been saying this for a number of years, and I think this is I still believe this in my core. People might know Kevin Kelly, the founding editor of Wired magazine. He has a lovely phrase, X plus AI. And I call this the formula for the future of your work. X plus AI, X being whatever it is you do. X plus AI. Add AI to whatever it is you do. You're a coder, you're a teacher, you're a politician, you're a podcaster, whatever. And that's how you're going to get in this 5-year window to the next performance threshold level that you need to get to remain competitive, to outperform, to have a good future. So X plus AI. And I think, as you say, young people are figuring this out more quickly than, middle-aged people and mature people. And that's a good thing. So X plus AI. That's the obvious thought. No surprise to your listeners, I'm sure. The more surprising thought, or as I say, the more contrarian thought, but it taps into you sort of talked about creativity and the human aspect of this whole story. Let's relate it back to the story of the lawyer we were talking about earlier on, who's fearing this, or the lawyer who's embracing it. If I, in say a couple of years or sooner, if I engage a lawyer to do some work for me personally, or if I'm the CEO of the company or whatever, and I know that in reality the work that I've engaged him to do is being done by the software that he's leveraging, he's employing there, and I know this guy's charging me $1,000 an hour or whatever, that person better give me a bloody good meeting, a bloody good experience. He better take me for a very nice lunch and laugh at all my jokes in the right moment and be charming and be a nice person to be around. He better give me a bloody good meeting. And my point here is that human interface, that's where I think a lot of non-technological people are going to differentiate themselves. And to differentiate yourself as a human being, you need to have what I call, and some people, again, older folks like me will know this phrase, younger people don't know this phrase, it comes from the medical industry, from being a doctor. You've got to have a good bedside manner. And I think that bedside manner in professions like, lawyering, medicine,
In every profession, right?
every
It doesn't,
profession
yeah.
has really degraded in the last 2 or 3 generations. And I think what we're going to see is a renaissance of bedside manner. And I think there's going to be commercial opportunity to have a superior bedside manner than your competitor. So again, young, posh, wealthy ladies used to go to Swiss finishing schools to learn manners and poise and etiquette and all those sorts of things. I think we're going to see a kind of reinvention, a renaissance of the Swiss finishing school, where we teach those kids who've been brought up with the phone in front of them, who hardly look up, hardly look you in the eye, hardly say good morning, hi, how are you when you go in the coffee shop. I think we're going to see a renaissance of that, an opportunity for non-technological people to be that human interface between the LLM that we know is really doing the work and the human experience that we value, and we can differentiate between this coffee shop and that coffee shop on. So, that's a thought for the non-techies in the room.
Ben, this is fantastic thought. There's so many other things I want to talk to you about. Please come back to Soga Talks, because one point that you made, okay, also all this education, lots of things that we used to learn on a job, it was basically replacing a computer. It was basically how fast, how automated we get as human, and how efficient we're going to get with those, 15 minutes doctor's appointment, okay?
Yep.
Doctor have to be a computer nowadays, right? Yep. And all professionals, right? The faster you are, the better you are. You bring the fantastic point back to the spotlight, okay? We don't have to replace computers. How about that? We have so much to offer in all these years of education and our intelligence, okay? It's not here to compete with computer. We're not going to win that race. Yeah, what we win is what you said, Ben. Yeah, bedside manners, just being human, just bring our unique perspectives, unique talents to the table. Ben, anything in conclusion?
Don't be a bad robot. Be a good human.
Beautiful, Ben. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Fantastic conversation today. Thank you.